The ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton in Paris shimmered like a dream spun from champagne and moonlight. Outside, the city whispered in glowing amber, its lights reflected in the Seine as though Paris itself had conspired to celebrate Camille Donovan's wedding night. The soft hush of classical music lingered in the air, blending with the clinking of crystal glasses and the rustle of silk gowns. It should have been the happiest night of her life, but Camille stood alone at the balcony. One hand resting lightly on the ornate railing, the other curled tightly around the stem of a forgotten glass of rosé. Her wedding gown, ivory, tailored, exquisite, fit her like a second skin. But now, in the solitude of the Parisian evening, it felt more like armor. The diamond on her finger, a vintage Voss family heirloom, glinted under the chandeliers. Delicate light. But the joy it once symbolized had faded. Damien had excused himself more than an hour ago, saying something about an urgent call from his father. He hadn't returned. She didn't want to admit the growing unease coiling in her gut. Not tonight, not on this night. She turned, stepping back into the honeymoon suite. The bed remained untouched. Rose petals lay scattered on the duvet like a trail leading nowhere. The champagne on the side table had lost its fizz, its promise of celebration now a flat reminder of absence. With fingers trembling, Camille reached for her phone. 3 missed calls to Damien. 3 voicemails unanswered. The silence screamed louder than any argument ever could. She was about to try again when a soft knock echoed through the suite. Relief bloomed in her chest. She moved quickly, adjusting her veil, forcing a smile to her lips. Maybe he had just forgotten his key, but when she opened the door, it wasn't Damien who stood there. It was a tall concierge, stiff in his uniform, holding a cream-colored envelope. "Madame Donovan," he said gently, eyes cast downward. "This was left for you. I was instructed to deliver it personally." Camille blinked, her fingers numb as they took the envelope. Her name was scrawled across the front in Damien's unmistakable handwriting. The hotel employee hesitated, as if debating whether to say more, but Camille's polite nod sent him on his way. Closing the door slowly, she leaned back against it, the envelope burning in her hand. 1,000 scenarios raced through her mind. None of them prepared her for what she read. "Camille, I'm sorry. I thought I could do this. I wanted to, but I can't. This isn't about you. It's about the choices I have to make for my family. By the time you read this, I'll be gone. I've filed for annulment. The hotel is paid for the week. I hope you can find peace. Damien." The words blurred as tears stung her eyes. She read it again and again, searching for something, anything that made it make sense. But it was final, cold, efficient, like a business memo delivered by a stranger. Camille sank to the floor, the letter slipping from her fingers. Her chest constricted as waves of disbelief and humiliation washed over her. She ripped off her veil, her fingers clawing at the tiny buttons of her gown, each one a reminder of promises broken, of vows abandoned. When she finally pulled it off, the dress puddled around her like a broken illusion. She caught sight of herself in the full-length mirror, still in her delicate lingerie, tears streaking her carefully applied makeup, hair cascading in perfect waves. A woman built for love, standing in the ruins of it. The room phone rang. The sharp sound jolted her, and for a moment she didn't move. But then instinct took over. Maybe it was Damien. Maybe he realized what he'd done and was calling to explain. "Apologize." "Hello?" Her voice was a fragile whisper. "Madame Donovan, I apologize for the late hour," came the front desk's measured voice. "There is a gentleman here requesting to see you. He says it concerns Mr. Voss." Her heart skipped. "Who?" "A Mr. Julian Blackwell. He says it's urgent. Julian Blackwell." The name barely registered. A business associate of Damien's, perhaps. A representative of the Voss family. Still wrapped in the hotel robe, Camille hesitated. "Send him up," she said finally. Whatever this was, she needed answers. Minutes later, another knock. This time she opened the door to find a tall man in a dark suit, no tie, and eyes that held something both intense and familiar. He didn't smile. He didn't offer condolences. He simply said, "Camille." There was something about the way he said her name, like it mattered. "I'm Julian Blackwell," he continued, stepping inside when she moved aside. "I know about Damien. I know what he did." Camille's spine straightened. "Do you?" "I do," he said simply. "And I need to explain something. But first, are you okay?" The question, so sincere and unexpected, cracked something in her. No one had asked her that yet, not even herself. I don't know, she said truthfully. Julian nodded. Then we'll start there. He didn't try to console her with cliches. Instead, he handed her a bottle of water and sat across the room, giving her space. After a long silence, he said, "This wasn't about love. Not to Damien. To his family, this marriage was strategy. An acquisition." Camille stared at him, her mind struggling to connect the pieces. "You're saying I was part of a deal?" "Yes," he said, unflinching. "Your father's tech company. The adaptive security protocols you developed last year. They've been trying to get control of that technology for 2 years. When traditional acquisition failed, they changed tactics." "Damien," she whispered. "Was the tactic," Julian confirmed. Camille's breath left her body. The romance, the whirlwind engagement, his sudden interest in her work. It had all been designed. "How do you know all this?" she demanded, her voice sharp with disbelief and rising fury. "I used to work with the Voss family. Years ago. I know how they operate, and I've been tracking their moves ever since I left. When I saw your name in their communications, I started digging." "Why me?" "Because you're the only person they couldn't manipulate through fear or money. You built something they couldn't replicate." Camille laughed bitterly. "And now they've destroyed me instead." "No," Julian said, rising. "You're not destroyed, not even close." She looked up at him, eyes still wet. "Why are you helping me?" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Because I've known who you are for a long time. And not just from boardrooms or news articles." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small worn photograph. It showed a science fair in a high school gymnasium. A younger Camille, triumphant beside a makeshift encryption demo. And beside her, a teenage boy with oversized glasses. "You were the only one who ever believed I was more than a nerd with an idea," he said. "Back in junior. Hi. You partnered with me for 2 projects. You don't remember, but I do." Camille's hand went to her mouth. "Julian? I went by Jules then. You gave me confidence when no one else did. You stood up for me when others mocked my ideas." She blinked rapidly, stunned by the memory. "A boy with kind eyes and big dreams. I disappeared after my mom got a job out of state," he said. "But I never forgot you. Or the way you made me feel seen." Tears returned, softer this time. "Why didn't you say anything before?" "Because I wanted to be someone worthy of your trust first. Not a ghost from the past. And certainly, not someone you'd suspect had motives." Camille crossed the room, standing inches from him. "And what are your motives now?" "To help you rebuild," he said, "and to make sure you're never used like that again." She searched his face, older, stronger, but still familiar. And for the first time that night, something besides pain stirred inside her. Something small, fragile, hope. Not because Julian promised to fix things, but because standing there in the wreckage of her wedding night, Camille Donovan realized she wasn't alone. Not anymore. The silence after heartbreak has a sound all its own. Thick, hollow, almost sacred. That's what Camille Donovan heard, as the morning light bled across the Parisian skyline. She sat still, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, watching the golds and pinks stretch over the Seine, as if the sky itself were trying to offer her a fresh beginning. But how do you start again when your life was supposed to begin the night before? The suite remained in disarray. The wedding dress lay lifeless on the floor like the remains of a beautiful lie, the rose petals scattered with no meaning, and the bed, pristine, untouched, waiting for a night that never happened. She had not slept. How could she? Each time she closed her eyes, she saw Damien's face, the man who had promised forever, only to vanish into the shadows of their wedding night, leaving behind nothing but a letter that read like a resignation. She hadn't moved for hours. What was the point? She was meant to be celebrating love, but now she sat in the ruins of it, trying to piece together what was real and what had only ever been staged. Then came the knock. It was soft, hesitant, yet certain enough to break through. The stillness like a thread tugging her back to reality. Her breath caught. For a wild moment, hope flickered. Maybe Damien had returned. Maybe he had made a mistake and wanted to take it all back. But when she opened the door, it wasn't her husband, ex-husband, who stood there. It was a man she didn't recognize, though something about him pulled at a distant thread in her memory. "Camille," he said quietly. His voice was low, steady, the kind you don't expect to hear in moments like this. "My name is Julian Blackwell. I was a friend of Damien's. A long time ago. His tailored suit was understated but expensive. His posture easy but alert. He wasn't there to sell sympathy. And he wasn't surprised to see her like this. Heartbroken, guarded, ruined. I need to speak with you, he said. Camille crossed her arms. About what? About why Damien left. And why you were never meant to be his wife. For a moment she thought about slamming the door. But something in his eyes, an intensity, a familiarity, made her step aside. He entered slowly, carefully, as if aware that he was stepping onto sacred ground. She offered no coffee. No chair. She stood there, arms still crossed, daring him to speak. I know you have no reason to trust me, Julian began, but you deserve the truth. And it's not going to come from anyone in the Voss family. She didn't respond. Her silence gave him permission to continue. I've been watching Damien's father, Edward, for a long time, tracking his acquisitions, his tactics. His interest in your father's company wasn't casual. Johnson Dynamics is one of the last few firms in the cybersecurity space he hasn't managed to take over. Camille flinched at the mention of her father's company. What does that have to do with me? Julian looked her dead in the eye. Everything. You weren't just a brilliant developer behind the adaptive encryption protocol. You were the leverage, the emotional Trojan horse. Marrying you was the Voss family's attempt to force your father's hand. She stared at him. You're saying Damien married me to get access to my work? Julian's silence said more than words could. Camille shook her head slowly, then faster. No, that can't be. Damien and I, we were real. We dated for almost 2 years. We lived together. He met my father. He studied you, Julian interrupted gently. He knew what to say, what to like, when to show interest in your work without looking obvious. It was a long game, Camille. One the Voss family has played before. She turned away, unable to breathe. You expect me to believe that 2 years of my life were a corporate strategy? I don't expect you to believe me, Julian said. I can show you. He pulled out a tablet from his briefcase and placed it on the coffee table. With a few taps, he brought up a file, dozens of pages long, detailing timelines, email exchanges, internal memos. The document was titled Operation Orion. Camille scrolled through the pages. Her name appeared repeatedly. So did her father's. So did her encryption prototype. She couldn't deny it. It was all there. Her knees gave out beneath her. She sank onto the couch as if the truth itself had weight. The betrayal was so vast, so calculated, that it made her physical. Her chest ached. Her hands shook. He proposed to me on the same weekend I gave my father the prototype, she whispered, remembering the picnic, the ring hidden in a pastry box, her tears of joy. He asked me to marry him the same night I told him about the algorithm. Julian said nothing. He didn't need to. Camille looked up at him, and for the first time she didn't see a stranger. She saw someone who had peeled back the illusion, no matter how painful. Why are you helping me? She asked, her voice raw. He hesitated, then said, because this isn't the first time the Voss family has destroyed something good for power. And because we've met before. She frowned. We have? Oak Hill Prep 10th grade. Science fair. You were the only girl in the competition. You beat every senior with your network model. And you let the quiet kid with glasses be your partner on the encryption demo. Camille's eyes widened. Jules? He nodded. I told her, I'd make something of myself one day. A half laugh escaped her lips, choked by disbelief. You disappeared. One day you were there and then you weren't. My mom had to move. But I never forgot you. Camille looked away, tears threatening again. Not for Damien, but for the girl she used to be. The one who believed in people because she thought believing was enough. I thought I was starting a life, she said, her voice trembling. Instead, I walked into a trap wearing a white dress. Julian knelt in front of her. Then let's rewrite the next chapter. She looked at him. Not with trust, not yet, but with something softer, something like curiosity. Why now? She asked. Why come back into my life at my lowest point? He exhaled. Because you don't deserve to face this war alone. And because I owe you more than you know. She studied him. The once shy boy was gone. In his place was a man who carried secrets, strength, and a past that intersected with hers in ways she was only beginning to understand. Do you believe in revenge, Julian? He tilted his head. No, I believe in justice. And what do you call what Damien did? A mistake he'll regret for the rest of his life. Camille rose from the couch, steadier now. Something had shifted. Not just the betrayal, but her reaction to it. She wasn't the girl in the veil anymore. I want my life back, she said. I want my work protected. I want my father shielded. And I want the Voss family to know they didn't break me. Julian smiled. Not out of pity, but respect. Then let's begin. As she turned to face the Paris skyline once more, the city no longer looked like the backdrop of a tragedy. It looked like a battlefield. And Camille Donovan was ready to fight. Camille Donovan had always known how to rebuild. Her childhood had taught her that strength was often born from necessity, not preference. Raised by a father who built Johnson Dynamics from his garage while raising her alone after her mother's death. Camille had learned how to code algorithms before she ever wore makeup, how to negotiate silence before ever learning to argue. So waking up the morning after Julian's revelations didn't feel like weakness. It felt like familiar territory. She had barely slept, but her mind had worked through the night. She'd reviewed every memory of Damien through this new lens, not as a partner, but as an actor in a well-rehearsed play. Every romantic gesture, every chance encounter with her father, the curiosity about her encryption protocol, it all took on a sinister shade. There was a precision to his betrayal that made it feel less like heartbreak and more like a strategic assault. Her apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt like a stage she'd never wanted to perform on again. Her lease was up in days. She was supposed to move into Damien's penthouse. Her job resigned. Her future sabotaged. And yet, as she sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by hastily packed boxes and shards of trust, she didn't cry. Not because the pain had passed, but because she refused to be broken in plain sight. A sharp buzz from her phone interrupted her thoughts. "Dad, baby girl." Samuel Donovan's voice broke through with warmth and concern. "I've been trying to reach you since yesterday." Camille closed her eyes. "I know. I'm sorry. I just needed time." "What happened, Camille?" he asked, voice laced with something more dangerous than worry. Quiet rage. "Damien left." "Me," she said flatly. "He walked out right after the wedding. Left a letter at the hotel." Silence. The kind of silence only a father can give when he's doing everything not to yell or swear. "Where are you?" "Still in Paris. For now." "Come home," Samuel said. "Let me take care of you." "No," she replied, firmer than she expected. "I got myself into this. I'll get myself out." Samuel sighed. "You're my daughter, Camille. That makes what happens to you mine too. And you should know. Yesterday morning, Edward Voss made another offer. Triple what he offered last quarter. He wants Johnson Dynamics badly." That offer wasn't coincidence. Camille's mind moved like code now, efficient, sharp. "Did you accept?" "Of course not," Samuel scoffed. "Our adaptive security suite is about to hit its full version. It's worth 10 times what he offered. But Camille, the timing, it's suspicious." Before she could answer, another knock rattled her hotel door. "Dad, I have to call you back," she moved towards the door, checking the peephole this time out of habit, no longer naivety. Julian stood there, casual in dark jeans and a tailored button-down, holding a bag that smelled faintly of roasted espresso and croissants. "Didn't think you'd be up this early," he said with a small smile as she opened the door. "I haven't slept," she replied honestly. "Then I brought the right fuel." Inside, he unpacked breakfast without pretense, spreading out fruit, pastries, and steaming coffee. Camille watched him silently. He moved with ease, not trying to fill the silence, but not afraid of it either. "How are you holding up?" he asked finally. Camille exhaled. "Do you want the PR version or the truth?" "Truth," he said. "Always. I feel like I married into a war I didn't know was being fought. Like I was handed a bouquet laced with grenades." Julian's expression tightened, but he said nothing. She sat down, sipped her coffee, then opened the divorce envelope again, still, on the table where she left it. Julian leaned over, scanning the pages. "These were prepared weeks ago," he said. "Look here, page 17, paragraph 3. That date? It's buried in the legalese, but it means Damien filed this before. You finalized your wedding guest list." Camille stared at the spot he pointed to. Her hands trembled again. He knew this whole time. "I told you," Julian said, voice low. "They don't play short games. The Vosses always have an exit plan, a pivot. You were never. The future. You were the access." She didn't scream. Instead, she picked up a piece of fruit and bit into it mechanically. And now that they failed with the wedding route, what? They just tried to buy the company again? Julian hesitated. I think that was the fallback. But I also think they'll escalate. Camille met his gaze. How much do you know about their tactics? Julian stood and pulled his phone from his pocket. Enough that I had this intercepted. He handed it to her. On the screen was a photograph. Her photograph, taken through a partially opened door as she changed out of her wedding dress. Her lace lingerie, carefully chosen, lovingly worn, captured in a candid she never knew had been taken. Her blood ran cold. They took pictures of me, she whispered. On my wedding night. Julian nodded grimly. Nathan Voss sent them, to Edward the night he left. My contact intercepted them, but they were going to use them if your father refused to sell again. The weight of it all, the betrayal, the invasion, the strategic cruelty, crushed her breath. She stood suddenly, needing motion. Delete it, she demanded. I already did, Julian said. From my device and theirs, but Edward may have more. She paced the room, hands clenched. Why are you helping me? She asked for the second time in as many days. Julian looked at her then, really looked. Because they ruined someone I loved once, someone who trusted them, and I didn't stop it. I couldn't, but I can help you. That's not an answer. He ran a hand through his hair. You remember Oak Hill Prep, science fair. You built a dual-layer firewall with 2 days' notice because someone sabotaged your project? She blinked. That was you? I saw what you did, how you stood up for your work. You were the first person I ever saw challenge a system that wasn't made for you. You didn't flinch. And you've been following me ever since? Watching, he corrected softly. Admiring. And yeah, protecting when I could. Especially when I saw your name next to Voss Industries in that engagement announcement. She didn't know what to say to that. But something in her chest loosened. Something she hadn't even known was tight. So what now? She asked. We hit back, Julian replied. Smart, quiet, strategic. They want your technology. They think it's just code. But they don't understand. It's you, and you're not for sale. For the first time in days, Camille felt her pulse steady, her power return. The tears didn't vanish, but they made space for something else. 2 days after her world had unraveled, Camille Donovan found herself standing in the quiet hallway of Johnson Dynamics, the company her father had built with his bare hands and sleepless nights. The hallway was familiar, comforting in its clean lines and soft lighting, yet today it felt smaller, the walls closer. Maybe it wasn't the hallway that had changed. Maybe it was her. She had arrived unannounced that morning, taking the early flight back to Chicago. Her father, Samuel Donovan, had insisted she come home, and for once she didn't argue. Not because she needed rescue, but because she needed roots, something solid to stand on before the storm hit again. Now she sat across from him in his modest office, a place filled with tangible memories. Her middle school art stuck to one cabinet. Her mother's photograph framed above a shelf of early tech prototypes. Her father was staring at the divorce papers she had handed him, the ones Julian had confirmed were drafted weeks before her wedding. His fingers trembled ever so slightly. I still think you should press charges, he said finally, his voice tight, controlled like a dam straining against a flood. Camille shook her head. And tell the police what? That my husband took private photos of me without consent on our wedding night before leaving me with a breakup letter? There's no solid proof that he still has them, and even if we had it, the scandal would damage our company more than it would hurt the Voss family. Samuel's jaw clenched. At 62, his salt and pepper beard and quiet authority gave him the presence of a man who had built and protected something valuable all his life, and now that legacy was under attack. This man, this entire family, they planned this. They humiliated you, and they're still circling like vultures. I know, Camille said softly, but this isn't just about me anymore. They want your company, your research, your reputation, and they're willing to use me to get it. The words tasted bitter on her tongue. She had always been proud of what she'd created, especially the adaptive encryption protocol that had begun as a side project in grad school and now stood at the center of a silent tech war. But now, it felt like a target on her back. Before Samuel could respond, a soft knock interrupted them. His assistant stepped in. Mr. Donovan, the representatives from Vostech are here. Samuel straightened his shoulders. Let them in. Camille stood too, brushing invisible lint off her navy blazer. "I'm staying," her father hesitated. "You don't have to." "I do," she said. "This ends today." Moments later, the conference room door opened and in walked three men dressed in tailored suits. At the center was Edward Voss, father of the man who had abandoned her, the real puppet master behind the scenes. His silver hair was immaculate, his blue eyes icy with calculation. The other two executives flanked him like silent sentinels. "Ms. Donovan," Edward said with a cool smile. "What a surprise. I thought this was a business meeting." Camille didn't flinch. "As Chief Innovation Officer of Johnson Dynamics, I am exactly where I belong." Edward's expression didn't change, but there was a flicker of interest behind his gaze. "Of course. My mistake." He turned to Samuel. "Shall we begin?" Camille watched them like a hawk as the offer was laid out again. Triple the current market valuation for Johnson Dynamics, retention bonuses for the executive team, and a vague promise of collaboration between the two firms. "And what about my daughter?" Samuel asked pointedly. Edward barely blinked. "Her involvement in recent events is regrettable, but we're prepared to separate personal matters from business." Camille leaned forward. "So it's just a coincidence that your son left me at the altar 2 days before you pushed this deal again?" Edward's smile didn't reach his eyes. "My son makes his own decisions. And the photos he took of me, also his own decision. This time, there was a crack in his composure. A flash of something, alarm perhaps, before he masked it again. "I think this meeting is over," Samuel said, rising. Edward stood too. "I would advise you both to reconsider. The market is volatile. A firm like yours may not hold its valuation for long." "Is that a threat?" Camille asked coldly. "Merely an observation," Edward replied. "Though I understand your sensitivity after recent events." Camille's fury spiked. "Let me ask you something, Mr. Voss. The divorce papers prepared 2 weeks before our wedding, just standard procedure? And the surveillance photos of me, souvenirs perhaps?" For the first time, Edward was silent. That silence said everything. "I'll have security escort you out," Samuel said firmly. As the Voss team filed out, Edward paused beside Camille. "You're playing a dangerous game, Miss Donovan. Be careful you don't get burned." When the door finally closed, Camille let out a long breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "You knew about the photos," her father said. Not as a question, but a fact. "I needed to see how he'd react." Julian was right. "They're planning to use them." Samuel nodded grimly. "This man, Julian, he seems to know a lot about their playbook. He used to work in government cyber intelligence," she said. "Now he runs a security firm, Guardian Systems. He's been tracking the Voss family for years. I want to meet him." That afternoon, Julian arrived at Johnson Dynamics, precisely on time, dressed in a charcoal suit that somehow emphasized both confidence and humility. He shook Samuel's hand with quiet respect. "Thank you for agreeing to meet me, Mr. Donovan." They sat in Samuel's office, the skyline of downtown Chicago glinting beyond the windows. Camille watched her father assess Julian the way he did new hires, measured, thorough, curious. "My daughter tells me you've been helpful," Samuel began, "but I still don't know why. What's your stake in this?" Julian nodded. "That's fair." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small device, setting it on the desk. "This ensures privacy," he said. "I believe the Voss family is capable of monitoring even secure networks." Samuel arched an eyebrow but allowed it. "I was recruited out of MIT," Julian continued. "Worked on encryption systems for the government. That's where I crossed paths with the Voss family. Their shipping company was a front for technology transfers, modifying software, selling it under aliases to countries under sanction. I refused to be part of it." Samuel listened in silence. "They tried to bury me," Julian said. "Discredit me, blacklist me. I left. Built Guardian from the ground up. And I've spent the past 10 years documenting what they've been doing behind closed doors. And you came to my daughter because," Samuel prompted, "because she created something that could blow their entire operation apart." Julian looked at Camille then, his voice softening. "Your adaptive protocol isn't just smart, it's revolutionary. They want to use it for something far beyond corporate security." Samuel leaned forward. "You think they want to weaponize it?" "I think they already have plans in motion," Julian replied. "And if they can't buy it, they'll steal it." Camille exhaled. "They were using me to get to you." Julian turned to her. "No, Camille, They were using you because they feared your mind. It was a small difference. But to her, it meant everything. The halls of Guardian Systems hummed with quiet urgency as Camille Donovan stepped out of the private elevator and into her new life. 2 weeks had passed since she'd accepted Julian Wells's offer to join his cybersecurity empire. Not just as a developer, but as an insider in the silent war against the Voss family. On the surface, it was a professional transition. In truth, it was a strategic repositioning. She hadn't just taken a job. She'd entered a battlefield. The skyscraper housing Guardian's headquarters rose like a blade over the Chicago skyline, glass and steel catching sunlight as though daring the world to challenge what it protected. Inside, everything was methodical, minimalist, efficiency without arrogance. Camille appreciated that. She didn't need noise or flash. She needed direction, control. And most of all, she needed a place where her mind could operate at full throttle without being someone's pawn. The security officer at the reception desk stood the moment she approached. "Good morning, Miss Donovan. Mr. Wells asked that I escort you directly to his office." Camille nodded politely and followed. She wore a tailored black pantsuit with a pale blue silk blouse, her hair pulled back into a low twist. It wasn't armor, but it gave her just enough distance from the girl in the wedding dress who had stood barefoot and broken in a honeymoon suite. Julian was already standing when she entered his executive suite. The room was sleek, understated. No ostentatious displays of power, just dark wood, soft lighting, and a wall of monitors displaying scrolling data streams and global threat indicators. When he turned to her, there was a glimmer of something rare in his expression, warmth, not possession, not pity. Possession, not just the quiet recognition of someone walking beside him, not behind. "Camille," he greeted. "Welcome to Guardian." "Thank you," she said, stepping forward and offering her hand. He shook it gently. "Let me introduce you to someone." A woman entered from a side door, dressed in a slim charcoal suit and flats. Her short bob was sharply cut, and her dark eyes were observant. "This is Nora Lynn," Julian said. "My chief operating officer and the backbone of this company." Nora extended her hand with a dry smile. "He's not exaggerating. Julian builds brilliant code and forgets what day it is. I make sure we don't accidentally launch satellites into the wrong hemisphere." Camille smiled, surprised by the genuine friendliness. "Camille Donovan," she said. "But I'm guessing you already knew that." "I followed your work for years," Nora said. "The adaptive encryption protocol? Elegant and nearly impossible to reverse engineer." Camille's smile faded slightly. "That's exactly what they're counting on." Nora nodded. "Which is why you're here. Come on, I'll show you to your team." The rest of the morning passed in a blur of introductions, secure credentials, and onboarding into Guardian's inner framework. Camille's official title was Director of Protocol Development. Unofficially, she was Julian's most valuable ally in the fight to dismantle the Voss family's stranglehold on the industry. By noon, Camille found herself alone in a glass-walled conference room, sifting through the company's encryption framework and quietly integrating the next evolution of her work. She barely heard the door open. Julian stepped in holding 2 coffee cups. "Thought you might need a refill." She looked up, surprised. "You're not a CEO who sends assistants for coffee?" "Only when I'm not trying to earn someone's trust," he said, setting the cup beside her. Camille took it and wrapped her hands around the warmth. "It's been a long time since I felt like part of something real." Julian sat across from her. "You are now. And I'm not just saying that. Your work, it could change everything. Not just for us, but for anyone who believes security shouldn't come at the price of personal freedom." Camille studied him. "You believe that?" "With everything I've got," Julian said. "Even before I met you again, but now it's personal." Camille didn't respond right away. She thought of Damien's voice, smooth with affection and artifice. She remembered how easily he'd made her believe the lie. Julian's sincerity scared her more than that betrayal, because it felt real, and real things had the power to break her. "Julian," she said finally, "I know this started as a mission for you, taking down the Voss family, but I need to know something." "Ask me anything," he said. "Am I just another angle in your campaign?" "No," he said without hesitation. "You were never the plan. You were the reason I changed the plan." His words hung in the air between them. Not romantic, not performative. Just truth. Before Camille could respond, Nora appeared in the doorway with urgency in her step. "We have a situation," she said. "Javier's team just intercepted internal chatter. The Voss family is accelerating their timeline." "Why?" Julian asked, standing immediately. "They're about to announce a new technology partnership with GFS Holdings." Camille's heart skipped. "Global Finance Solutions. That's one of the largest banking data hosts in North America. They've integrated your protocol into the announcement," Nora added, handing Camille a tablet. Camille scanned the data. The architecture had been altered, the branding changed. But the core, the seed of it was hers. "They're using my work, rebranded, obscured, but it's mine." Julian's voice dropped into steel. "They're trying to beat us to the industry, make it public, establish ownership." Camille looked at him. "We can't let that happen." "We won't," he said. "We're scheduled to present Guardian's updated platform at the Denver Tech Summit next week. We'll move our launch forward, and while we're there, we gain proximity to their servers." Nora added, "Our contacts confirmed the Vosses store private comms and encrypted archives in their Denver satellite center, including the original surveillance footage." Camille's hand clenched into a fist. "Then we're going to Denver." Julian nodded. "But we don't just react, we lead. Let them chase our tail for once." That night, after hours of planning, Camille stood alone, on the balcony of her secured Guardian apartment. The skyline was lit up, stars dimmed by the electric glow of ambition. She stared at the lights, letting the silence steady her pulse. Her phone buzzed. A message from Julian. "You're not alone in this. Not anymore." Camille stared at it for a moment, then set the phone down. She wasn't sure if she was ready to trust again. But something told her she'd already started, and this time, if she fell, it wouldn't be in silence. It would be in fire. Camille Donovan hadn't planned on returning to Denver, not under these circumstances, not carrying this kind of fire inside her. Yet here she was, walking through the glass atrium of the Summit Grand Hotel, a badge clipped to her blazer that bore the name of the company she now represented, Guardian Systems. But this wasn't just a tech summit. It was a war zone disguised in clean lines, smiling executives, and endless coffee stations. Beneath the polished charm of the event, Camille could feel the tension humming like a live wire. The Voss family was here. Damien was here. And their announcement, the one she and Julian had intercepted intelligence about, was scheduled for the very morning after Guardian's presentation. Timing wasn't a coincidence. It was a power play. As she stepped into the main conference hall, her eyes instinctively scanned the crowd. There, across the room, standing tall and smug in a dark charcoal suit, was Damien Voss. Time hadn't dimmed the chill his presence brought. His gaze met hers for only a second before he turned away, but it was enough. Her stomach clenched with an emotion far more complicated than hate. She turned sharply and walked in the opposite direction, heading toward the Guardian booth where Julian Wells was already engaging with other developers. His expression shifted the moment he saw her. One of calm steadiness, the kind of gaze that didn't try to own her pain, but offered to carry it. "I just saw him," she said quietly. Julian nodded. "He's been watching you since the moment you stepped inside." The words didn't surprise her. Nothing about Damien surprised her anymore. Not his betrayals, not his games. What did surprise her, perhaps, was the steady hum of clarity that had taken root inside her. He no longer had the power to define her. Their presentation came swiftly. The room was packed, some drawn by Guardian's rising reputation, others there to witness the quiet standoff playing out between Camille and her ex-fiancé's empire. Julian handled the introductions. Then Camille stepped forward, the soft glow of the stage lights brushing her face, casting her in a different kind of spotlight, one she chose. She spoke of innovation, of protecting not just systems but people. She spoke of ethics, of integrity, and the human cost of technology built for exploitation. She walked the room through her adaptive protocol's core philosophy, not just what it did, but why it mattered. When she stepped down to a storm of applause, she didn't feel triumphant. She felt vindicated. Julian leaned toward her. "You just raised the bar." "They'll respond," she said. "He'll respond." That night, as the city glittered outside her hotel suite, Camille stood barefoot by the window, arms wrapped around herself. Her phone buzzed. A message from a blocked number. "You looked beautiful today, but we both know this is going to end badly. For you." Her jaw tightened. There was no name, but there didn't need to be. Damien's threats had never needed signatures. They carried the stench of his entitlement, his condescension. She replied with a single sentence. You taught me how far I'll go to protect what's mine. I hope you're ready. The next morning came like a storm. Vostek's announcement was slated for 9 a.m., but rumors began to swirl by 7:45. Camille was seated in the suite she shared with Julian, watching the encrypted live feed Javier had secured. The Voss family's innovation had gone public, and it was unmistakably, undeniably hers. Camille stared at the code diagrams on the screen, her breath catching, her original logic flow, her unique segmentation method, repackaged, renamed, but hers. This is it, she whispered. They stole everything. Julian's face was hard, focused. We hit back now. We send the dossier, all of it. Nora appeared in the doorway, her tablet already open. I've compiled the evidence. The press has it. Regulators too. All we need is your word. Camille's voice was low but clear. Send it. As the clock struck 9:15, Guardian dropped the bomb. Encrypted emails, source code metadata, documentation of the surveillance, a clear trail leading from Damien Voss's laptop to the compromised Guardian research files. And then, the kicker, a clip of a conversation between Damien and a Vostek board member, casually discussing how Camille never needed to know it was all about the algorithm. The media caught fire. Within minutes, news outlets were broadcasting. The scandal industry leaders were distancing themselves from Vostek, and GFS Holdings publicly announced an immediate pause on their joint project. The halls of the summit transformed into a hive of whispered speculation and barely contained schadenfreude. Camille didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She just sat in silence, absorbing it all, the storm of validation and the quiet ache underneath. That evening, she stepped onto the rooftop balcony alone, needing air. The sky was painted with the dusky violet of an impending snowfall, and the mountains stood in silent witness beyond the lights of the city. Julian joined her without a word, his coat draped over his arm. He held it out and she took it, wrapping it around her shoulders. She didn't speak until she was sure her voice wouldn't crack. Do you think people can ever really change? She asked. He didn't hesitate. Some can, the ones who want to, and the ones who just pretend. To change until they get what they want, they lose everything. Eventually, Camille turned to face him. He told me he loved me. He looked me in the eyes and said it wasn't about the business. I know, Julian said, and I'm sorry. I believed him. And now, he said gently, you believe in yourself. She looked at him for a long moment, searching for something she couldn't name. And then, without warning, she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. Not because she was breaking, but because she wasn't. I couldn't have done this alone, she said against his chest. You didn't have to, he said, his voice close. You never will again. As snow began to fall in soft, hushed flakes around them, Camille Donovan realized something. She had finally won a war she never asked to fight. And in the wreckage of what had been taken from her, something stronger had emerged. Not revenge, not victory, but truth and freedom, and perhaps the beginning of something that could finally be hers. The private jet touched down just after dawn, the tarmac still silver with dew, and the skyline of New York blurring. Behind a veil of low-lying fog, Camille Donovan stepped off the aircraft with a guarded composure that belied the chaos churning inside her. Her heels clicked against the metal stairs with a rhythm too steady to be anything but rehearsed. The past 48 hours had been a cyclone, her work nearly stolen again, her name dragged into a media firestorm, and a betrayal confirmed that still echoed in her bones. But now she was home, at least as close to home as any place had felt since the night of her wedding. Julian Wells walked just behind her, quiet, his presence a stabilizing force. Since Denver, they'd moved like two halves of a newly formed whole, separate but undeniable, in their alignment. There were questions that hadn't been asked between them yet, emotions that hovered in the quiet spaces of their conversation. But they were moving forward, and for Camille that was enough. For now. She didn't go straight to Guardian's headquarters. She made a detour to a brownstone tucked into a quiet corner of Brooklyn, where the lights were never on past 10 and the mailbox still bore the name Donovan. Her father's voice came over the phone earlier that morning, ragged and urgent. Camille, we need to talk. Alone. When she arrived, Samuel Donovan was already waiting in the front room, the faint scent of strong coffee and aging books wrapping around her like memory. He didn't rise from his armchair when she entered, only looked up at her with eyes that had seen too much in recent months. "I saw the press conference," he said. "I saw everything." Camille nodded, unsure what to say. What could she say? That she hadn't expected it to hurt so much? That some part of her still wanted to believe Damien Voss could be redeemed, even if she knew better. But her father wasn't focused on Damien. He reached for a file folder resting on the side table and handed it to her. "This came yesterday. Couriered. No return address." Camille opened it, hands suddenly unsteady. Inside were photographs, grainy but unmistakable. Julian meeting with a known Johnson Tech rival. A scanned document showing a Guardian Systems subsidiary filing suit against Johnson Tech. Dates. Locations all neatly marked. On the surface, it painted a picture of yet another betrayal. "I didn't want to believe it," her father said. "But Camille, if this is true..." She stared down at the papers, her mind racing. Julian had told her there were people within Guardian trying to sabotage them, board members planted by the Voss family, old government ties. He'd sworn he didn't know about the lawsuit until it had already been filed, and yet, proof, however curated, was sitting in her lap. "Dad, I need to figure this out for myself," she said, voice quiet. He nodded, though worry never left his eyes. "Be careful. You've already lost too much." She left the brownstone with the weight of doubt pressing into her spine, her resolve weakening under the accumulation of broken truths. But she didn't cry. She didn't scream. She did what she always did. She gathered the facts. She asked the right questions. When she arrived at Guardian, the mood was electric and anxious. The press was still circling, regulators requesting meetings, investors watching every step. Nora met her in the executive lobby. "You're not going to like this," she said without preamble. "But Nathan Voss is here. He says it's urgent. He's waiting in the private conference room." Camille's stomach clenched. "He walked into this building?" "He walked through security with a passcode," Nora replied. "One of our clearance levels was compromised." Of course it was. She entered the conference room alone. Nathan stood at the window, hands in his pockets, his reflection staring back at him like a stranger. "You've got 2 minutes," Camille said. "Make them count." He turned but didn't move closer. "I'm not here to convince you of anything," he said. "I'm here because my father is planning something worse. Worse than stealing my work and humiliating me in front of the entire tech world." He didn't flinch. "Yes, much worse. You know about Project Haven?" The name froze the air in her lungs. "Yes," she said slowly. "An abandoned initiative from 5 years ago. Dual-layer security tech, encrypted, on both ends. Theoretically untraceable. My father didn't abandon it. He's been developing it off books, with stolen components, including your protocol. If he launches it, it'll allow foreign entities to conduct surveillance on US networks without detection." Camille's heart pounded. She had suspected as much, but to hear it confirmed, "What do you want from me, Nathan?" "Help me stop him," he said simply. "I can get you access to the mainframe where the data's stored, but I need something in return." Of course he did. Camille folded her arms. "Let me guess, immunity, protection." "No," Nathan said. "I want you to destroy it publicly. Burn every part of it. Make it unusable. I want him to know his own son was the one who handed him over." For a moment, all Camille saw was the boy he'd once been. The one who kissed her on a rainy rooftop in Milan. Who said her mind was the most dangerous thing he'd ever loved. But that boy was gone. Buried beneath layers of loyalty and betrayal. "Leave the information with Nora," she said, turning to go. "And don't come here again." That night, Julian found her in the Guardian server room, the hum of machines, filling the silence. She was cross-checking the files her father had given her with Guardian's internal logs. "I heard about Nathan," he said. "What did he want?" "To bury his father." Julian didn't respond. Camille turned slowly toward him, eyes narrowed. "You said the lawsuit against Johnson Tech was filed without your knowledge." "It was," he said carefully. "Then why are there clearance logs with your encryption key dated 3 days before the lawsuit was initiated?" Julian's jaw clenched. "Because someone spoofed my key. We found the breach this morning. It's how Nathan got in today." "And the meetings with my father's rivals?" "I meet with dozens of executives every quarter," he said. "That photo was taken at a public tech mixer in London. You can see the background. It's all smoke. And mirrors, Camille. designed to drive a wedge between us. She stared at him, heart thudding. Do you swear to me on everything that you've never used me to further your fight with the Voss family? His voice cracked, barely audible. I swear. And in that moment something shifted. A breath of faith restored. A fracture beginning to mend. But it wasn't over. The next morning, Guardian's security team launched a full-scale extraction operation on the data Nathan had provided. Project Haven was real, and far more dangerous than Camille had imagined. She had one chance to dismantle it before it could be deployed. They assembled a strategy. Camille would present their findings at an emergency tech ethics conference called hastily by the FTC. She would expose the operation, not just to regulators, but to the public. But before she left for the event, she walked into Julian's office. Her shoulders squared. There's something else, she said, her voice shaking. I'm pregnant. He froze, the air between them charged with shock. 8 weeks, she added. It happened in Denver. I found out a few days ago. Julian crossed the space between them like a man waking from a dream. He reached for her hands, his voice rough. Camille, are you okay? Do you want this? She didn't hesitate. I don't know what the future holds, but yes, I want this child. He took a breath, long and steady, his eyes never leaving hers. Then we protect this, whatever it takes. As she left the building, a storm brewing outside mirrored the one still unfurling inside her. But Camille Donovan wasn't afraid of storms anymore. She'd walked through fire, survived betrayal, faced down powerful men who thought they could define her story. Now she would write her own ending, and nothing, not fear, not the Voss Empire, not even the child growing inside her, would take that away. The city was cloaked in a somber grey as Camille Donovan stood before the towering glass facade of the federal courthouse. The weight of the impending testimony pressed heavily on her shoulders, a culmination of months entangled in betrayal, resilience, and the relentless pursuit of truth. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with anticipation, the air thick with the gravity of what was to unfold. As she stepped into the courtroom, Camille's eyes met those of Damien Voss. His gaze, once familiar and warm, now held a cold detachment. The man who had once professed love now sat as the embodiment of deceit. She took her seat, the murmurs of the crowd fading into a distant hum as she centered herself for the testimony ahead. The proceedings commenced with the prosecution presenting a meticulous account of the Voss family's illicit activities. Documents, emails, and testimonies painted a damning picture of corporate espionage and ethical violations. Camille's name surfaced repeatedly, her innovations manipulated and misused in a web of deceit. When called to the stand, Camille's heart pounded, but her voice remained steady. She recounted her journey with precision, detailing the inception of her encryption protocol, the trust she placed in Damien, and the subsequent betrayal. Her words resonated with the courtroom, a poignant narrative of ambition tainted by treachery. During a cross-examination, the defense attempted to undermine her credibility, suggesting complicity or negligence. Camille responded with unwavering clarity, her composure unshaken. She presented evidence of her efforts to safeguard her work, her warnings ignored, and her discoveries suppressed. As the day progressed, the courtroom witnessed a parade of witnesses corroborating Camille's account. Former employees, industry, experts, and even members of the Voss inner circle testified to the systemic exploitation of Camille's innovations. The defense's arguments weakened under the weight of mounting evidence. Outside the courthouse, media outlets buzzed with updates, the public captivated by the unfolding drama. Camille's story became emblematic of the struggle between integrity and corruption, a narrative that resonated far beyond the tech industry. In the quiet moments between sessions, Camille found solace in brief conversations with Julian Wells. His presence offered a steadying force, a reminder of the support that had emerged amidst the chaos. Their bond, forged in adversity, provided a glimmer of hope in an otherwise tumultuous journey. As the trial neared its conclusion, Camille delivered a final statement. She spoke not only of personal betrayal, but of the broader implications of unchecked ambition and ethical compromise. Her words served as a clarion call for accountability and integrity in an industry at a crossroads. The jury deliberated, the courtroom tense with anticipation. When the verdict was announced, guilty on multiple counts, the room erupted in a mix of relief and solemn acknowledgement. Justice had been served, but the scars of the ordeal remained. In the aftermath, Camille stood on the courthouse steps, the city skyline stretching behind her. Reporters clamored for statements, but she offered only a brief reflection. This journey has been arduous, marked by pain and resilience. I stand here not as a victim, but as a testament to the power of truth and the importance of standing firm in one's convictions. As she descended the steps, Julian joined her, their paths now intertwined not just by circumstance but by shared purpose. Together, they walked into the future, bearing the lessons of the past and the promise of a new beginning. 6 months had passed since the trial that reshaped everything. In the crisp stillness of early spring, Paris was coming to life again, blooming with the promise of renewal. The city's cobbled streets bore the echoes of a world that had once tried to consume Camille Donovan. Now it held the new beginnings she had fought so relentlessly to claim. Camille stood on the balcony of the Guardian Europe headquarters, the Eiffel Tower rising in the distance like a monument to impossible dreams made real. Beside her, Julian Wells poured 2 cups of herbal tea, a small but quiet ritual that had become their morning custom. They hadn't just survived the chaos, they had evolved. After the Voss empire crumbled under the weight of its own deceit, Camille and Julian had done more than just pick up the pieces. They had merged their talents, reputations, and values into something greater. The formation of Aurora Systems, their joint venture in ethical security technology, had sent ripples through the global tech industry. But for Camille, no accolade or media headline compared to the quiet triumph of living in truth. Inside her office, a photograph sat on her desk, her and her father arms around each other, laughing outside her childhood home in Savannah. He had retired finally, after a lifetime of building and fighting for Johnson Innovations. Now he spent his mornings fishing, his afternoons painting, and his evenings calling Camille to ask about baby names. Yes, the baby. The undeniable, miraculous, complicated life growing inside her. 4 months along now, Camille had moved past the fear, past the nausea and insomnia, past the whispered doubts about whether she could trust again, love again. Now she looked at her future as a woman transformed. Not because she'd been betrayed, but because she had chosen to reclaim power from that betrayal. The baby had changed Julian too. He was softer at the edges, warmer in his words. Not possessive, never insistent, but present always. When he learned of her pregnancy, he hadn't made grand promises or offers of rescue. He simply stayed. One day at a time, one conversation at a time, he proved that love, real love, isn't loud or dramatic. It's patient, earned, quietly unshakable. Later that afternoon, they visited a school just outside the city, a new non-profit that Aurora Systems was funding, focused on teaching young women cybersecurity skills and innovation ethics. Camille sat in a circle of 12 girls, their eyes bright with curiosity and ambition. She shared her story, not the press version, but the raw version. The one where she cried alone in a honeymoon suite, tore off a wedding gown like it was a shackle, and stood before a room of lawyers demanding the right to be heard. She watched their faces change, realize, dream. On their way home that evening, Camille looked out at the Seine. Her hand instinctively rested on her growing belly. Julian glanced over from the driver's seat. "You're thinking again," he teased gently. "Always," she smiled, then grew quiet. "Do you think she'll know? Our daughter? About everything that came before her?" Julian reached over, his fingers lacing with hers as they crossed the bridge. "She'll know who her mother is. That's all she needs." And in that moment, Camille believed him. That night, they hosted a dinner. Just close friends, no reporters, no grand speeches. Her father was there, with his silly jokes and doting eyes. Nora, their steadfast partner from Guardian, flew in with her wife. Javier sent wine and a note promising to visit after his next stop. They laughed, they danced. And when the cake came out, chocolate, dense, unpretentious, Julian surprised Camille by slipping a simple ring on her finger. No public proposal, no flashbulbs, just him, kneeling quietly in their kitchen whispering, "Only if you want forever with me." Camille said yes, not because of the fairy tale, but because she'd lived through the nightmare and still believed in love. A week later, they returned to the States, landing in Savannah for a few days of rest. One morning, Camille took a walk through her father's old garden, now wild with honeysuckle and rosemary. She sat beneath the pecan tree where she'd once done homework as a child and pressed a palm to her belly. A soft kick. It made her laugh, unexpectedly. Not just joy, but awe. This life, this baby, would never know the woman she'd been before the betrayal. And that was a blessing. Camille had become someone new, not hardened, but healed. You know, she said quietly, there was a time I thought heartbreak would define me, that who I was would always be the woman left behind. Julian turned to her. And who are you now? She smiled, resting her head on his chest as waves kissed the sand. I am the woman who dared to start over. They stood there for a long time, just listening to the wind. And so the story of Camille Donovan did not end in heartbreak. It ended in something far braver, rebirth. A future built not on the ruins of betrayal, but on the foundations of courage and clarity. She had been left on her wedding night, humiliated, manipulated, used, but the millionaire who had loved her, in silence stepped out of the shadows not to rescue her, but to walk beside her. And together, they built a world no one could take from them, not even fate. In the end, Camille Donovan's journey is not merely a tale of betrayal, corporate espionage, or even rekindled love. It is a masterclass in resilience, a powerful testament to the inner strength that lies dormant in so many women until life demands they awaken it. When Camille was abandoned on her wedding night, it wasn't just her heart that shattered. It was her belief in everything she thought she knew. But instead of letting that pain define her, she rebuilt from the ashes. She didn't just survive. She redefined what thriving meant on her own terms. Her story reminds us that healing is rarely linear, and trust once broken takes time and truth to restore. It speaks to every woman who has ever been manipulated, underestimated, or told to stay quiet. Camille chose to speak up. She chose to fight. And in doing so, she not only protected her future, but inspired countless others to do the same. Through her, we learn that betrayal can be a beginning, not an ending. That real love doesn't arrive in a whirlwind of promises. It arrives in consistent presence, in actions, in quiet belief. And perhaps most importantly, her story shows that dignity is not something anyone can take from you. It's something you reclaim step by step with every brave decision you make. As you close this chapter, ask yourself, what would you fight for if fear weren't holding you back? What part of your life is waiting for you to reclaim it? Let Camille's journey inspire yours. If this story moved you, if it made you feel seen or simply entertained, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Your support is what fuels us to keep bringing these powerful emotional stories to life. Hit that subscribe button now so you don't miss what's coming next. We promise the next chapter will be even more unforgettable.